Welcome to Australian basketball history. Why don't we start with your name, where you're based, and how long you've been playing basketball?
Hi, I'm Darren Lucas. I grew up in Lower Templestowe and spent most of my adult life in Brighton, in Victoria. And I've been playing basketball for 50 years, so I'm now 57, so pretty much all my life.
Where did it start? What's your earliest memory, Darren?
My earliest memory was my first game I played with a mate of mine, Drew Wilson, and I scored 0 baskets. It was at Manningham Primary School. It was with Manningham, and because my sister played basketball, it got me into basketball. And then the second game, I scored, I think it was 38 points. So that was the most I scored for a long time until I beat it in an NBL game. So yeah, that's my earliest thoughts of basketball.
And so early on, you had a great shooting success, and I think over the course of your career, hopefully we'll get to discuss the interplay between your defensive and your offensive skills. But back then, what were these early skills like? How did you first sort of come to stardom?
Well, I was playing against my sister in the backyard, and she's quite a strong girl, and I had to do a lot of fadeaways because we had a staircase on the left, so I didn't have a left hand, and we had grass on the right, so I had to do fadeaways. So I suppose I was more of an offensive player in my junior career. All the guys that I played with for Bulleen, we played for 10 years without losing a game with the Bulleen Boomers. And most of those guys knew me as an offensive player and never really a defensive player, which I converted to, obviously, with Goorjian later in my career.
And was there a team that you were following in those early formative years? Was there someone that you aspired to sort of emulate on the court?
Yeah, well, look, when I was young, I actually really didn't watch the NBL or SEABL or anything like that. I actually was concerned when I was about 14 or 15. I was like, what happens after under 18? I actually loved basketball, and I just was like, do I stop playing basketball? I didn't know anything about any leagues after that until I got approached by Adrian Hurley for a scholarship at the Institute of Sport, and that's when I learned about the NBL and the SEABL at the time.
Well, tell us about that move to AIS.
Well, it was a great move. I got offered a college degree sponsorship when I went and played in a tournament in Canada. So it was a choice between, do I play in college in America or do I play in college, at the Institute of Sport. But because I was a bit of a mummy's boy at the time, I sort of thought the move to Canberra was a lot more palatable. So I moved there, lived there with 10 great mates, and pretty much 6 or 7 of them were still great mates, and we still play basketball together now from Adelaide. Peter Sexton, Graham Cubank, Matty Buck, all those guys. That was a great part of my life because it brought me out of my shell. My roommate next to me was Trevor Torrance. He played with the Perth Wildcats for 300 games, and we became best mates. So it was just a really good, going to college, playing basketball, living with mates. It just brought me out of my shell, and it obviously, did it improve my basketball as much as college basketball would have? I don't think so, because I was more there for the social life. So I actually worked in a nightclub there, and I'd never drank before I went to the Institute of Sport. So it was a different, I suppose, level of commitment back then. Now I think if you go there, there's a lot more rules and regulations, but back then it was pretty loose.
1986, Nunawading Spectres. Tell us about that pathway.
It was funny, I got poached by Theo Kotspakidis. Theo was a great Greek guy that loved basketball and invested a lot of money in basketball, and he, along with Barry Barnes, poached me, and I think my first contract was maybe $3,000 for a year, and then I think next year was 4.5, and the next year was 5. And I think Barry last year, but that first year playing with Nunawading was great. I lived in Bulleen, or Doncaster at the time, and it wasn't that far away, and I loved it. I loved the team. I loved playing. It was a lot more serious. It was a lot harder than I was used to. When you're playing a junior career and you're so used to winning every game. So we won 10 years in a row before losing a match with my Bulleen team. So coming across to the NBL, all of a sudden you're winning 50% of the games, if you're lucky. That was a really hard thing to, you're so used to winning grand finals, and all of a sudden you don't make the grand final, and you're still playing well and you're enjoying it and loving it, but it's just it's getting used to that level of professionalism, I suppose. And back in the 80s, it wasn't that professional. We trained once a day. I was one of 2 people that actually had a full-time job later on in my career. In those days, like people like Warren Pink, he was a police officer, that everyone else had jobs. But as we got into the early 90s, not too many people actually had jobs. So those early years with Nunawading, where we moved down to Knox and played at Knox for a year, they were great. Barry Barnes taught me. He was a hard coach, so he taught me, you know, some great rules that I could take into my future career. And then obviously Brian Goorjian came a little bit later and taught me different things.
Tell us about the culture within Nunawading Spectres. At that period, it was a hyper-competitive kind of organisation. It might not have had all of the professionalism that comes with today's games, but what were some of the cultural forces going on inside Nunawading Spectres, and who were the personalities that were driving it?
Well, it was great because I was in my 20s. We had players like Vince Hinchin, who was really athletic. We had Bruce Bolden back in those days. We had Dean Udoff. You know, Dean was great for my career for 1 year when he did the big long pass to me. And I think I had 46 points in one game just from his passes against Perth. So look, they were great. Look, the people that owned the club back then, you know, Ray Wiltshire, Fisk, a bunch of guys, I've forgotten the guys' names, but there was about 5 owners, and they were all just normal people. They weren't millionaires. There's one guy who owned Billabong restaurants. You know, Phil Wade, he was a police officer. So there's all these different characters that weren't millionaires, but they had passion for basketball, and that reflected in the way we played. And that was the league back in the 80s when I played with Nunawading. It obviously became a lot more serious, a lot more professional when Brian Goorjian took over, and we changed from being the Nunawading Spectres to, I think, South East Melbourne Magic. So those early years were great fun. I was working at the Chevron nightclub. I worked at Adidas with Teddy Whitten, so that was a lot of fun. And the games, look, as I said, look, I was probably maybe the 3rd or 4th best player in the team at the time, because we'd have the Americans, Arnie Duncan, who's now a politician in America. We had, you know, all these guys, some guys that couldn't play that well, but they were great shooters. They weren't all, some were just all-round athletes, but terrible team players. So it was just back in those days, it was getting the right American to fit your culture, which is probably the same issue people have nowadays, but not too much to a certain extent.
1992 was a bit of a magic year for you and the Spectres.
Yeah, 1992, as I mentioned previously, we weren't winning any grand finals. We weren't getting into many grand finals. 91, I think we got into the grand final in Perth and lost, and that was a hard act to follow. We had Kent Lockhart, and he was a really energetic, weird sort of dude, but he just played hard. He played really hard. And then we come into 92 after losing the 91 championship, all pumped. And look, I suppose the thing I took out of the 92 championship, that was when Brian Goorjian had converted me from an offensive player to a defensive player. There was one game in specific, we were playing the Giants, and he said, "I want you to stop Wayne Carroll." And I knew who Wayne was. He was an Olympian, and he wasn't that athletic. He was sort of like an Andrew Gaze, but older. So I remember that game was at the Glass House, and I just went, okay, I've never really focused on this, but yeah, I'll focus on it. And I kept him to, I think it was 8 or 10 points. So that's when something clicked with Brian and said, geez, I can focus this guy and get him to start playing defense and stop the main offensive player. So it was from that moment on that I became a defensive player. And look, there's certain times in your career you actually enjoy playing offense in my juniors. And then I really enjoyed in 92, the best thing about the 92 championship was stopping Andrew Gaze. And I think Andrew Gaze got maybe 12 points and he was averaging 30 points. And of those 12 points, I think he had one outside shot and the rest were all foul shots. So and I remember Ian Stacker coming up to me after the game going, "Darren, you're a legend. You stopped Andrew Gaze." And that's when I really said, okay, this could be the future of my later half of my career. So, and my offense, obviously, you bring in players like Rob Rose, your offense, and Andrew Parkinson, who can shoot the hell out of it. All of a sudden, Darren Lucas driving to the hoop, doing a bit of a fadeaway jump shot or a bit of a loop-de-doo shot with not much, I suppose, amazing skill, but a lot of effort. That was basically, okay, Darren, you're now a defensive player. So from about 92, 93 on, that's when I started to become a focus on Darren's our defensive go-to man.
John Dorrance coming out, that threat to steal the ball again. Lucas does an excellent job. Dorrance blocks gaze, but it comes out the...
What were the next steps in your professional basketball career following that 92-93 time?
Well, look, I was, again, as I said before, I was myself and Ray Gordon were the only two guys in the NBL that were actually working full time. So Brian Goorjian had his training from 10 till 12 and then 2 to 4. So I attended the 2 to 4 training. My boss obviously didn't know that, but we didn't train every day. We trained pretty much, out of 5 days, we'd probably train 4. So that was a year from 92 onwards to 96. That's where I was juggling my work career at Xerox at the time, and playing NBL. So, and I became captain in 95, 96. So Brian Goorjian was amazing for me because he converted me from an offensive player into a defensive player, which gave me longevity in the league. But I suppose in retrospect, he also shortened my career because he very much brings in younger players, and that's what he does. And back then I was, I didn't like what he did, but he's an amazing coach and he's the best coach in Australia. There's no doubt about that at all. So the way he brings in young players, I didn't agree with it at the time. We won the 96 championship and I was captain, and that was great, but it wasn't nearly as good as winning the 92 championship, because 92 championship I played 48 minutes, stopped Andrew Gaze. In the 96 championship I played 13 or 15 minutes and was captain. Different sort of enjoyments, but not nearly as exciting as the 92 one.
Goorjian clearly gets your vote as best coach. Best player you've ever played with and why?
That's a pretty easy one. Rob Rose was easily the best teammate I had in regards to skills. And the reason why, he was such a nice guy. He could play defence, he could play offence. We had so many Americans come through the Magic and Nunawading that could shoot, but just weren't team players and couldn't play defence, or were a lot weaker on defence. Whereas Rob Rose was all of that. He could play defence, he was great, he would dish the ball. If you needed a basket, he'd get a basket. He played at 110% all the time. Easily by far my best teammate in regards to skill set and effort. And a hell of a nice guy to go with that.
And what is it that makes a great team and not just a great player within that team?
Well, I look at the 92 championship and, possibly the 96 one to a lesser degree. And I relate it a bit to the Chicago Bulls team. And, that's no disrespect to them because they're obviously so much better. And I know Luc Longley because we went to the Institute of Sport together. But you've got role players in each team. So in 92, my role was defensive. I had to stop Andrew Gaze. Scott Ninnis's role was he had to stop Leonard Copeland. And then we had Darren Perry had to run the team. So everyone had a really good role. It was very specific, very similar to Chicago Bulls. Luc Longley was the rebounder. Jordan was the playmaker. Pippen was the Andrew Parkinson, the next one. And then you got, Dennis Rodman. I was a bit of the Dennis Rodman. I had to, get angry, play hard. So I suppose the teams that have great role players win championships. You get a bunch of players that are all really good athletes and good individuals, they won't win championships. It's been proven. There was one player, and I won't mention his name, during my career, he struggled to win a championship because he was a bit of a cancer in a team. So you've got to have good people, you've got to have people that are happy with their roles to have a championship team.
The Dennis Rodman analogy is one that I haven't heard before, but it's a really good one. These days when we rock up at a Masters basketball tournament and the whisper goes around that Darren's here, people end up saying, be careful, it's going to be tough under the basket there. So it's a really helpful analogy.
They'd probably say a little bit more negative than that. Watch out, he's angry.
No, not at all. Best player you've ever competed against?
Look, Andrew Gaze would probably be my number 2 because I actually, when I think about it now, I had his match, so I knew how to play him. Shane Heal, I knew how to play Shane. There was one player for the Sydney Kings, and I've forgotten his name, an American about 6'5", in the 93, 94 era. Could shoot it, could drive. And he was tough because most players, when you're playing defence against them, you sum them up. Andrew Gaze is slow, I can get into him. But his whole team looks for him. So I have to be on the whole time. Shane Heal shot from behind his head. So I could play defence on the side because he wouldn't drive, and I could block him from behind. So every player that you came, like Steve Carfino was a great all-round player, but he wasn't an amazing outside shooter. So when you come up against players, you pick what their weaknesses are. And this guy, I've forgotten his name, Dwayne McLean, I think it was, Dwayne McLean. He was 6'5", he was taller than me, he was quick as, and he could shoot from outside. So he was the sort of player you didn't know, do I play him close? But if I play him close, he was quick enough to get past me. So I would have to say probably Dwayne McLean from the Sydney Kings.
Yeah, great. When you look over the arc of your career, do you have a memorable moment or a favourite story that you like to tell?
Oh, look, I think the 92 championship is my favourite out of my whole career. It was, like my whole junior career was focused around scoring, and I'd average 34 points a game with my Bulleen Boomers players, and we still go on wine tours and catch up together, so we still got that friendship there. But that was my junior career, and it was all offensive based. Then moving to living at the Institute of Sport with, away from the family and Trevor Torrance and all the mates that I've got from there was amazing. But then I suppose that pivotal time with the Wayne Carroll moving to defence and then winning Defender of the Year for 2 years and coming up second in the first year. So the first year I think it was 92, I was runner-up. 93, 94, I was the Defensive Player of the Year. So that was a good recognition because I was making MVP teams in the early part of my career for my offence. So all of a sudden I'd changed and I was a bit of a chameleon. So it wasn't just my offence, which I was used to. All of a sudden that took a step back, and Bruce Bolden and Rob Rose and all those people, I suppose, took that role over, and I took on the defensive role. So yeah, so that's the important times at all different times of my career. My junior career, my getting ready for my professional career, and then into my professional career. And look, in '96 when we won the championship, I didn't want to retire, but I also didn't want to leave and go to another club because, and this is the thing that I find hard, is I played for the same team for my whole career. But when you look at it, Darren played with Nunawading Spectres, Darren played with South East Melbourne Magic. So there's all these different clubs, but it was all the same people, all the same owners, same coach. I didn't move anywhere. So that's one thing I'm very proud of. I'm very loyal. My dad was like that. He ran the Bulleen Basketball Club for years, so he was very loyal that way. And me playing for the same basketball team, and in '96 I could have gone and played in Illawarra or somewhere else for lesser money, but because I had a job, I had to weigh up. I get paid really well in this job. Do I want to take my wife and my newborn daughter to Illawarra or somewhere, somewhere else? But yeah.
So not all basketball players make it to Masters basketball players. It's family, it's work, and sometimes it's bad knees. Tell us about your transition to Masters basketball.
Yeah, look, that first happened when my Institute of Sport guys reached out to me. There was a tournament in Europe, in Turin, and they said, do you want to come and play with us, with the Steelers? And so I went and played with them and had a ball. We played against Russians who were being paid by Russia to play, and they were ex-Olympians, and it was. And I hadn't played really hard basketball for a long time. I continued to play it on a Monday and a Wednesday night, and occasionally I'd play 3 times a week on a Thursday night in Frankston. But it was all just against people that were lesser, that hadn't played before, and all of a sudden I come to Turin and play in a Masters, and you're playing against people that are ex-Olympians and still playing at a really good level. And I get to play with Mike Mackay and Graham Cubank and Pete Sexton and Lumpy, Steve Leonard and all these guys I used to play with and drink with them and have fun with them. So this was a new outlet for me. And then the Has-Beens came along. So the Has-Beens, we put together a team: Andrew Parkinson, Sam McKinnon, Chris Anstey, a bunch of those guys that we used to play together. All of a sudden that friendship was rekindled through basketball and through Masters, which that for me is the best part of my basketball career coming out of my professional career, is the Masters tournaments. Look, there's probably too much drinking going on, and some of the tournaments are too long, but I like the tournaments that are 2, 3, 4 days, because you can get in, get out, you don't have to take too much time off work. and you can get to be with your friends and have a drink with them and see all your old teammates from past.
We recently interviewed Pete Lawler, and one of the things I said to Pete Lawler, another member of the Has-Beens, is that we faced off against you at the last Great Barrier Reef Masters games in the finals, and it was a pleasure to be thrashed by you, Darren.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Look, some of the games we played in Cairns, I didn't agree with. We played a few games where you had to shoot from 3-pointers. You couldn't do anything else but 3-pointers. And then there was another game you can only shoot left-handed shots. So I don't agree with that. I'd rather go out and play hard, enjoy it, and if you lose by 60, you lose by 60. Obviously you wouldn't do full court presses in the Masters, but I love playing against in all the tournaments like that, because you do get to play against older teams. You see where I'm going to be in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, and you sort of go, well, I hope I can be a little bit better than that. But, as age takes you, everything slows down. Luckily, my defence is still strong, and my offence, I can still pass the ball really well, but my offence is very slow. But those tournaments aren't just for the basketball. They're for the comradeship. They're for the catching up with people you haven't seen for years. And just telling the same old stories you've been telling for years. And hence, Pete Lawler, I went to one of the Masters in the car with him, so we had like a 12-hour drive. So I got all his stories. An amazing guy and an amazing life.
You mentioned shorter tournaments. We recently talked you into putting on a Myths and Legends jersey, and you, Andrew Parkinson and Shane Bright played with us down at Torquay, which is an up-and-coming and a growing tournament. What was that weekend like for you? That
was probably one of the best tournaments I've played in. It was short. It was Saturday, Sunday, and we'd play a game, and then we'd go lie by the beach, have a swim, get the joints and the body moving in the water, and then come have lunch, and then come back and play another game. So we had 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and I really enjoyed it. Look, I would have loved to have one more bigger guy in the team, because I was the tallest in the team, apart from Parky. But no, it was a great team and a great, I suppose, entry into Myths and Legends, because I've played against them for years, and this is the first time Rob Kavanagh put me onto it, and I went and played with him. He works for me on my business Lux coach occasionally, and I loved it. It was great. It was just one of those, it was a good mix of sun, surf and basketball. And the only, I suppose, negative thing about it, I wish I had stayed down there for the weekend. I actually drove back every day, and it was only 2 days, but that's 5 games. We won the championship and got some good friends out of it.
Will we see you at PanPacs 2024?
Yeah, definitely see you at PanPacs. I don't know whether I'll be there for the whole 10 days, because it is a long tournament. Well, I think it's maybe 8 days the games start. I think the first game's on a Saturday or Sunday, but yeah, it is a long tournament to take a week off work. And it is usually a week of drinking, especially with the has-beens. Look, I'll try and mix it up, have some work in Brisbane, and hopefully, combine the two. I'll have some work and then enjoy it. So I'll definitely be at PanPacs.
How do we grow Masters basketball in Australia? What are the opportunities that we should be focused on? What's the noise we need to make in order to get more attention, participation, support for Masters basketball?
Great question. The team I play with on Wednesday nights at Sandringham, we play against the same 6 teams every week. And you get sick and tired of people knowing your weaknesses, right? So we need to get a competition where it's 50 plus or 45 plus. Because 30 plus, there's a lot of 30-year-olds that can still play really well. And when you're 57, it makes it harder. It's just not as enjoyable. So I really think we need to get like a 50 plus comp and make it across Victoria. And, have one in Bulleen, have people travel each week, We did it for the kids when we were younger. We've rep basketball. You travel to, Rosebud, then you travel to Sunbury. I think guys who are playing basketball in their 50s have got the passion for that. And if we find a day and also a competition across like on a Thursday or Tuesday, find the slowest comp, and then use those games and actually play against all the different 50-year-olds. Because when you're playing a comp in Sandringham, all of a sudden you're playing against the same old people every week. And to have a Victorian comp in over 50s on a certain night at a place where they have a bar where you can have a drink afterwards, I think that's a huge thing, because I see what Adelaide and Brisbane have done for years. They have bars and it's a real social event. Everyone goes and has a drink. What they do at Sandringham is they bring beers and have a drink outside in the cold. So I think a combination of going to a venue where you can sit out and have a drink afterwards or have a chat and just have an over 50s comp, that is my dream. I'd definitely be into that.
Us Masters basketball players talk about the fact there's almost a glaring omission in the way that the industry is sort of structured. There's no shortage of youth tournaments. There's one on every single weekend, but that starting point of getting one stadium to talk to another stadium and setting up some kind of a tournament, or moving like Adelaide have to over 50s and over 60s, that's the kind of nucleus of discussion that we really need to sort of kick off so that we can get a bit more support.
Yeah, I think Basketball Australia needs to play a big part in that. I'll have a chat to Jason. I don't think it's high on his priorities with Paris coming up, but if you've got the backing of Basketball Australia, they're very much focused on the NBL, on the juniors, and they just forget about the seniors. Seniors is probably 20% of the people playing basketball, let's say from 40 plus. There's still a lot of people playing basketball, and there is no focus on that side of things. So I really think Basketball Australia needs to step up and go, all right, let's make a league. Let's make an NBL for over 50s, all right, and see how it goes. You're not going to get sponsors, you're not going to get, but it's giving veterans a chance to play in a good league, and make it national if you want. I'm sure if it was a league that once a month you had to travel somewhere, you'd do it, especially if you had the same team and it was professional. So look, Basketball Australia, let's get moving on this, because we really need some focus on 40 plus, 40, 50 plus for a basketball competition.
We had this chat before. Basketball Australia is well aware of countries in the world, some of them quite surprising, that have very structured, very strategised Masters basketball leagues and competition. And they're countries like Slovenia and Lithuania and Brazil and Great Britain and Germany and South Africa. So the precedent's been set, it can be done, and we've got no passion for no shortage of passion for Masters basketball in Australia. We just need to follow, I guess, in the footsteps of those that have already done it and done it successfully.
Yeah, look, if you took account of how many people play in Masters basketball tournaments, but those tournaments are usually also netball, soccer, athletics, golf, the whole lot. Let's just make a basketball tournament. We've got enough support for people over the age of 40 to run basketball tournaments. Like there's the Torquay one, there was one at Bulleen that Missing Legends ran. There's the Gold Coast one every 2 years. There's one in Adelaide. Let's make a really good one that's just basketball, And that's, I think, if we get Basketball Australia behind that, then we get, who knows, we might get sponsors, but at least we'll get a lot more attention, a lot more enthusiasm from everyone. We'll get more people there.
Darren, you've got a really interesting life outside of basketball. Tell us a little bit about what you do and the other bits of life that take your time up.
So my daughter runs my business Lux Coach. So that's basically a 13-metre bus with a butler on board and a private cocktail bar. It's got recliner lounge chairs. So she runs that from Yamba, up near Byron Bay, and the bus is based in Melbourne. We're building 10 of them. That's the goal. So I don't actually do that 9 to 5, but on weekends I drive it occasionally, or I clean it, or I do all the easier stuff. And my staff, they'll be the butlers for the day and make cocktails for people doing winery tours. We probably get 70% of our business through corporates, team building events, taking people down to Jackalope, to Point Leo Estate, to Yering Station for lunch. So that's one part of it. That's Lux Coach. The other part is I'm a estate manager of an IT company called Mediaform, and I've been in print. I was 20 years at Xerox, so I've been in the print game, photocopiers, for about 30 years. And I now, with Mediaform, we do laptops, we do IT. So I'm really excited growing that side of the business. So that's what I do 9 to 5. I work out of Box Hill. I've got clients that buy printers off me and 400 laptops. So it's good. It's not just printers anymore. I'm as an old guy, 57-year-old guy, I'm learning IT now, and probably half my revenue is IT. So look, I love the mix of having Lux Coach for weekends, which is more me, because it's more fun. It's a bar, it's drinking, it's people enjoying themselves from the time they leave their office or home to the time they get to a winery, versus jumping into a minivan or a bus or sitting next to each other. So there's Lux Coach, which I love, and there's Mediaform, which I'm just so used to, and it pays the bills, and I love working there, and they're a great IT company.
A couple of questions to finish off, Darren. At what age do you retire, and at what age do you stop playing basketball?
I think very similar to Theo Kotspakidis. The minute you retire is the minute your body goes downhill. So I don't plan on retiring from media form or particularly Lux coach till I'm 70, till I'm 80. I want to keep working. In regards to basketball, I think it's pretty similar. Like, I think basketball, I've had a few falls, 5, 8 years ago. And I think because I play basketball and I'm so aggressive and physical when I play, my body gets used to falling. And the times I've fallen, like once in front of my daughter, she goes, "Oh, Daddy, you okay?" And I think basketball actually prepared my body to get up and go, "Yeah, that should have hurt," but it actually didn't. So I think playing basketball into my 70s and 80s is going to be a great thing for my body to keep me moving, because that's what I want to do. I want to keep moving. I don't want to be running everywhere, but I'm happy to have a slow jog and bump and hustle and get a few wins on the board. So yeah, so look, that's basketball is great for my mental and physical longevity as I go into my senior years.
Darren, it's great to play with you and against you. Thanks for your contribution to the sport. Play hard. All the best.
All right, thanks very much.